Hi, I'm Tia and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you all of the books that I read during the month of July. So during the month of July, I managed to read 14 different books. It was really an up and down reading month for me. Some of these were massive disappointments and some of them were amazing reads. So I think I'm going to start out with telling you the ones that were more of a disappointment to me. I haven't talked about it on the channel yet, but this year I have been participating in the Summer of Sarah McLean readathon, which basically is a group of people over on Instagram who have been reading through Sarah McLean's entire backlist. Sarah McLean is a historical romance author who I have been interested in reading for quite some time, and so I decided to join in on this readathon. In this point in July, at the beginning of July, I would have read I think we'd already read like 4 or 5 of her books, and the first couple were pretty good. By the time we got to July, I started to wonder if this was the best decision for me to continue in this readathon. So the ones that I read of her in July were quite the disappointment. So let me just tell you about them. The first group of books that I read by her in July is a 4-book series called the Rules of Scoundrel series. And this is a series that follows 4 different people who run a gaming hell in London. And each book follows a different owner and their love interest. So the first book in the series is A Rogue by Any Other Name. And like I said, it's by Sarah McLean. So this one follows the Marquess of Bourne, who lost his entire estate and inheritance in a game of chance gambling, and he has worked his entire life for revenge to get his estate back and to have revenge on this person who took his estate from him. His love interest is a girl who he knew as a child. Their estates were next to each other and they played together all the time when they were children, but after he lost his estate, he disappeared and he didn't have anything to do with her. When he meets her again in this book, he is not very kind to her. He's actually quite terrible to her. I've heard people say that this is, and I think even Sarah says it herself, that this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, which was definitely interesting, and I enjoyed that aspect of this book. This one is probably my most favorite one out of the 4-book series, which seems to be my way with her. With Sarah McLean, I end up enjoying the first one, and then the other ones just sort of become repetitive. Enjoyed both of the main characters in here. The guy is kind of a jerk at the beginning, but when you look at it through the lens of a Hades Persephone retelling, it's okay. I think that this one I gave 3 stars. To me, it was definitely the best one in the series. Then the second one in the series is One Good Earl Deserves a Lover, and this one follows another owning of the gaming hell, and this one, let me see, oh, his name is Cross, or they call him Cross. And it's following the sister of the girl from the first book, and her name is Pippa, and she is a very smart, intelligent woman. She wears glasses, which, you know, all intelligent women do apparently. Anyway, she is into botany and she knows a lot about science, and she knows all of the bones in the body, and she's unlike anyone that Cross has ever met. So I really enjoyed her character. I liked her as a heroine. This is when I started to think that Sarah McLean's writing might just not be for me. Her writing becomes very repetitive, and because each one of the books in the series is following a different person, they all start to sound the same. Their thought lives start to sound the same. Their characteristics just all start to blend together. The way she writes them and their thought processes and the way they speak is not different enough from the previous books to make each book stand out in my mind. And there's also, what really bugs me is the way that she writes emotions. And it's like anytime they have an emotion, this is so piddling, but it happens over and over in all of these books. Like he wants to roar, like you would say roared in frustration, right? but she says roared his frustration or groaned his pleasure. She leaves out the in, the preposition, every single time. And it's just become so repetitive and so like grating. And it's not the way that I normally think or speak. And so it just becomes obnoxious to me. That's just a me thing. I know that it doesn't bother everyone. A lot of people really love this author, but by this point I started to find it really repetitive. Okay, then the third book is No Good Duke Goes Unpunished. And this one I checked out from my library. This one follows Temple and Mara. Temple was thought to have killed a woman back before the start of this book, and the girl that he is thought to have killed is actually Mara. He meets this beautiful woman in his past, and when he wakes up the next morning, she is gone, but blood is everywhere and she is missing, so everyone just assumes that he has killed her, but there's no evidence or anything, so I don't think he's never convicted. It's just that he is always talked about and doesn't really have the same standing in society anymore. So, but Mara reappears later, you know, at the beginning of the book, and this ends up being their relationship, and it was just a little bit too much. It was too out there for me. I didn't enjoy either one of these characters at all, especially Temple. I don't know, I really didn't like Mara either. I mean, she had aspects of her character that were enjoyable. She was running a home for orphans and like a boys' school of boys who had like been abandoned by their societal fathers, who, you know, maybe they were bastard children. They weren't going to be accepted by society, so they were just abandoned here, and Mara has taken them into this home, this school for boys, and that was admirable. And that was about the only thing that was admirable to me. I didn't enjoy this one either. The same repetitive aspects from the other books were there. These characters were really forgettable to me, and yeah, I didn't really like it. Then the fourth and final book is Never Judge a Lady by Her Cover, and this one I can't really tell you who this is because it would spoil the previous books, but this one follows a mysterious heroine, and her love interest is a newspaper man whose name is West, and he has been in the previous books as well. So these were two characters that I actually really enjoyed. I really like West, and I really enjoyed the heroine in the story, whose name I can't tell you. And I will say that I do enjoy the way that Sarah MacLean interconnects all of her different series in her books, because if you start her works from the beginning, she will have characters from, you know, her earlier series show up in different series. So I really enjoy that. It sort of makes this whole world that you enjoy finding all the interconnectedness with. That's one thing that she does really well. But again, the same thing with the emotions. Groaned his pleasure, roared his frustration. There's a lot of groaned his pleasure, okay? Or groaned her pleasure, or I don't know, cried her pleasure, whatever. It's too much. It's too repetitive. And I don't know if I would have noticed it if I hadn't been reading all these back to back like this in 1 month, well, during the summer. Maybe I wouldn't have noticed it, and it would have been more enjoyable for me if I had read these much further apart, like one a month instead of one a week. I don't know. I guess I'll never know, but yeah, I didn't enjoy this either. I will say that I enjoyed this more than books 2 and 3 in the series, but I think number 1 in the series was still the best one out of these. Breaking up some of the Sarah MacLean, I read the second book in the Cajun Country mystery series. This is Body on the Bayou by Ellen Byron. So this follows a woman who has moved back home, and she's living with her parents and helping out at their bed and breakfast, as well as working as a docent at a neighboring plantation. And in this book, she is the maid of honor to like her frenemy, this woman that she hates and always talks bad about. For some reason, she's her maid of honor in her wedding. Someone turns up dead at the bayou close to where her parents' bread and breakfast is. She is embroiled in the investigation, of course, and she is desperate to find out who done it. I really wanted to read a mystery series set in Cajun country in Louisiana, and the first book of this series was interesting enough for me to want to pick this one up, but the character in here, I don't like her thought life, and I don't like the way that she looks down on other women for silly things like the way that they dress or the makeup that they wear or even how much they weigh. It's very like beautiful and thin is good, it feels like, in these books, and overweight and dyed hair or whatever is bad in these books, and it's so frustrating. So the storyline, the investigation part, that part's interesting enough. It's just the thought life and the immaturity of this grown woman who is like in her 30s, the way she thinks and talks about other women, it's just too much for me. And I will say there are times in this book where the characters come across as characters. How do you say that word? I don't know. Characters of Cajun people. They don't come across as real people. They come across as like this comic stereotype of Cajun people. And a little bit of that can be okay, I think, at times, to give the story like ambiance and setting, but sometimes it just becomes too much. So sadly, I don't think I'm going to continue on with this series. I don't think that this just didn't show enough character growth for me and the main character for me to want to continue on. And I started another series by Sarah MacLean, and this is a trilogy called the Scandal and Scoundrel series. And in these books, so far, the first two, the two heroes are friends and they are considered to be scoundrels, and the two women are both involved in their own separate scandals. That's how we're connecting those two. So these two, I feel like were a little bit better than the previous series, the Rules of Scoundrels series. The repetitive nature of the writing lessened a little bit in these two, but I still wouldn't say that I would recommend this series, which is so sad because I really wanted to love these. But anyway, the first one is The Rogue Not Taken. This one follows Sophie, who's one of the Talbot sisters who is not really accepted in society because their father is not really like a normal landed gentry. He has like made a ton of money and I think bought his title or been given his title because of his business. The scandal just seems to follow them wherever they go, and Sophie is the one that is the least interested in pleasing society. She actually doesn't want to live in London. She wants to return back to her country house where she grew up, and she ends up meeting this man who's called King throughout this book. Whose name is King? I don't know. It really bugged me. But anyway, so she meets King on this adventure of hers on her way to get back to her country estate where she grew up. And there's a bit of a road trip in this book, which I really enjoyed. I did enjoy the characters of Sophie and King. I thought that they were fun characters. They had a lot of witty banter that went on between them. If you enjoy historical romances, that this one might be worth a try. I think I would recommend skipping all of her previous works before this and starting here if you are wanting to give Sarah MacLean a try. Then the second book of this trilogy is Ascot in the Dark, and this one follows the Duke of Warwick, who is a Scottish man, and he is a friend of King. We saw him in the first book. And the Duke of Warwick also came by his title in a strange way. He was like the 18th heir to this dukedom. He had no desire to ever be a duke, but it has fallen to him, and now he has to take up the role of being a duke. And I think 5 years into his dukedom, he discovers that the duke actually has a ward that he was never told about, and until one day when he gets a letter from his solicitor telling him that his ward is involved in this huge scandal and that he needs to come to town to sort it all out. And this ward's name is Lillian, and it's a little bit iffy that the romance ends up being between the Duke and his ward. But in their defense, she is definitely of age. They say a bunch in there how she is a little bit old to be a ward, but it's just the circumstances that have kept her that way. Why she, why she hasn't gotten married and she's remained a ward. So they're definitely both of age, and it's definitely like a consensual relationship. So I think it's just when you think of a ward, you think of them being like a young child, but it's definitely not the case in here. But anyway, it's their relationship. I did enjoy both of these characters, but I think the second book, Syndrome, it started to become a little bit repetitive in the series, and I didn't like these characters quite as much as I liked the previous characters. These two in this book, the Duke of Warwick, the Scottish man, it is just mentioned over and over and over how big he is, how tall he is, how giant he is. It's repeated so much, it's like really drilled into your head. And then Lillian is supposed to be the beauty of London, and that is repeated over and over and over and over, and that gets to be a bit much too. But other than that, I mean, it's an okay read. And again, so if you're into historical romance, you might enjoy this one. Those are the books that were a bit of a disappointment to me during the month of July. So now I'm going to move on to the category of these books were okay. They weren't like terrible. They weren't disappointing. They just, they were just okay. And the first one of those is going to be The Magic Misfits by Neil Patrick Harris. This is a middle grade novel that I would say is written towards the younger end of middle grade, like probably about 8 or 9 years old. It follows a young boy whose name is Carter, whose parents have both died, and he has been left to live with his uncle, who is not a very moral or ethical person. He is someone who uses sleight of hand to trick people out of their money, and Carter is really good at these like magical misdirections, and the uncle wants Carter to help him basically pickpocket people or swindle them out of their money. And Carter doesn't want to have anything to do with that, so he runs away from his uncle. And he finds himself in this little town where there's a carnival going on, and there are a lot of people there who are practicing misdirection. And he ends up in a magic shop in town where he meets several other young people who are interested in magic, and he kind of falls in with them and befriends them. And yeah, it's just a little adventure that this group of friends gets up to. I would say that the most interesting part for me in here was that there were magic tricks in here that you could do on your own, and I actually did a few with my kids, which was fun for me. And the book was cute. It just wasn't anything spectacular or special or memorable, and I don't really plan on reading the rest of this series. Next is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. So this is a book about racism and white people specifically, why it's hard to talk to white people about racism. And this book, I definitely think had some good and interesting points, and there are things in here that I think were beneficial for me to read and are beneficial probably for everyone to read. I do think that this book the language in here was not that accessible at times. There were sentences in here that felt like riddles. I know I've heard other people say that they thought that this was very easy to read and digest, but it was a quick read. I would say I got through it pretty quickly, but I didn't necessarily think that it was that the way it was written was very easy to read. I know that's not making any sense. I think that this became a little bit repetitive at times, but I don't think that that takes away the importance of this topic. It basically looks at biases that white people have and sometimes don't even know that they have, just based on how they grew up, what neighborhood they grew up in, the type of school that they went to, the treatment that they received as a child, and even that they receive now as an adult, definitely as they receive now as an adult. And the ways in which we use that to color how we talk to other people and the way we interact with other people. And so I do think that this is a worthwhile read, and I would recommend it if this is a topic that you were interested in. I didn't feel like this was the best, most informative book on racism. I definitely think that there are probably other books out there that are better than this one, but I would say give this a try. It's really short, it won't take that much of your time, and it will probably be informative to you in some aspects, if not all aspects. I do think there was some stuff in here that, you know, I already knew and had already thought of, that weren't like new ideas, but there were other things that were more eye-opening. Okay, now we're going to move into the books that I did really enjoy this month, and I think the first ones that I will talk about will be the ones that I read for the BookTube prize, starting with Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This is a book I checked out from my library, and this is a book that follows 12 different Black British women, and it is a multi-generational story, and it's told from different perspectives of the women, following them over many different years. And as you go along, you get to see the connections between these different women, and it was very interesting and very well written. And if you would like to hear more about this book or the other BookTube prize books, I will link that video down below in the description box if you would like to go and check it out. Then The Night Tiger by Yangsze Chu is another book that I read for the BookTube prize. This book is a historical fiction mystery set during 1930s Malaysia. It follows two different characters. One is a young boy who is a doctor's assistant, and the other is a teenage girl who is working nights at a dance hall to work off her mother's gambling debts. The lives of the young boy and the teenage girl intersect in here as they both are trying to discover different mysteries that are happening around them. This was a very interesting page-turning novel, and I enjoyed watching it all unravel. And again, check out my BookTube prize video if you would like to see more of my thoughts on that. A Single Thread by Tracy Chevalier. This is a book that is following a woman in 1932 England. Her name is Violet, and she is a surplus woman. She lost her brother and her fiance during the Great War, and now she is living her life knowing that she will always be alone. She won't ever have a chance to get married. She's already 38 at this point, and there just aren't enough men around in England at this time for all of these extra women who have been left here. And it's sort of hard whenever these women have basically been raised to think that their job is to get married and have a family, and now they are left to find a suitable position for them to make enough money to be able to care for themselves. Anyway, this just follows her journey and her struggles to make ends meet during this time in history, and I really enjoyed this book. If you would like to hear more of my thoughts, go check out my BookTube prize video. And the final BookTube prize book, this one I really loved. It was my favorite of the month of July and of all my BookTube prize books. This is The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, and this is a multi-generational family story centering around this really huge house in Pennsylvania. It follows this family over 50 years, the ups and downs, the struggles of their lives. It has a really great sibling relationship at the center of the story, and it has fabulous characters that are likable and unlikable. You're not sure if they're good or if they're bad. They make good decisions, they make bad decisions, and you really end up caring for all of them. So I would highly recommend this one, and like these other books from the BookTube prize, if you would like to know more, I'll link that video in the description box. This month I read the 7th book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and that was Rainbow Valley by L.M. Montgomery. This is a book that follows the lives of Anne's 6 children and their new friends who have just moved in to their town. Those children are the Meredith children, and you just follow all the hijinks that these 10 children get up to, their ups and downs. You end up really caring for the Meredith children and what it's like living with their dad, who is very introspective, very much a thinker and in his own thought world. The Meredith children's mother has passed away, and so they sort of just end up taking care of themselves a lot of the time because their dad he's really just in his own head most of the time. They meet many different friends. They spend a lot of time with Anne's children. But overall, I would say the big focus of this book is the Meredith family, which was a bit surprising. I sort of expected this to be more focused on Anne's family and Anne's children than a completely separate family. But either way, I really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was really heartwarming. There were surprisingly some racist terms in here that I was not expecting to read, and I would have thought that in 2020 or even, before 2020, the editors would have taken those words out of these editions. It would be so easy to just take those words out. They don't have to be in there. Anyway, that was my big complaint, or my only complaint about this book. Other than that, I thought it was a heartwarming, charming addition to this series. The final book that I read during the month of July is one that I started in July and finished early on August the 1st, but I'm including it here in this July wrap up, and that is The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. So this was probably a questionable choice given that we are still in the middle of COVID, but I just couldn't keep myself away. So surprisingly, I didn't realize how long ago this book was written. This was Michael Crichton's first novel, and it was written in 1969, if you can believe that. It is about this organism that has come to Earth from outer space, and the United States is on the brink of an outbreak because of this organism. It's basically following this group of scientists who are teamed up together to try and figure out what this organism is, how it spreads from person to person, what they can do to stop it, can they find a cure or a vaccine. So at times this book was definitely thrilling. Towards the end, my heart was beating pretty fast. There were times in this that were pretty gross, some pretty horrible descriptions of what the virus does to you. But there was also a ton of science in here, a lot of technical explanations and scientific explanations that at times veered to be just a little bit too much, I would say. It wasn't enough to ever throw me off of the book or make me want to stop reading or not find it enjoyable. I was still definitely glued to the page, wanting to know what was going to happen. But if that's something that maybe might scare you off, just keep that in mind if you were thinking about reading this book. I think it's definitely better to go into it knowing that there's going to be a lot of science and technology talk, so that you sort of expect that going in. But it was a great story, and it was thought-provoking and interesting, and I'm just so glad that I read this. I've heard that there is an older movie based on this book. I wish that they would remake it. I think that it would make a really interesting, up-to-date movie. So yeah, I would love to know if you have read this book and what you thought about it. I think those are all the books. I think I got everything from the month of July. So let me know down in the comments if you read any of these books and what you thought about them, or if you're interested in reading any of them. And if not that, just tell me what one of your most favorite reads in the month of July was. My favorite has to be The Dutch House, but also it's closely followed by A Single Thread and The Andromeda Strain, and then also Rainbow Valley. I really enjoyed Rainbow Valley too. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Goodreads if you want to keep up with what I'm reading, and that way I can see what you are reading as well. Also, let me know if you have any videos that you would like for me to make, any topics that you would like to hear me talk about. That would be great for you to comment down in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.